Hi, good afternoon, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is part of a quarterly series co-sponsored by the United States Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service and the Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families. My name is Rachel Polon, and I'm joined by my colleague Mimi Wu. We're both nutritionists at the Food and Nutrition Service, and we're happy to be here with you today to talk about the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or as we call it, CACFP. Today we're going to focus on the CACFP meal patterns, as well as resources available to help you implement the meal pattern requirements successfully. And we also plan to respond to some frequently asked questions that we've received from our partners in the Head Start community. So we're actually going to hold on this slide just for a moment in case there are any folks out there having trouble hearing us. This will give them a chance to dial in through their phones rather than relying on computer audio. And if at any point you experience audio problems during the webinar, please feel free to dial this number. We'll actually leave it on the bottom right-hand side of the screen for your reference throughout the presentation. And just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online at a later date. So without further ado, let's begin with an overview of nutrition policy in CACFP. And first, I'd like to set the framework by mentioning some program basics. First, CACFP provides both financial aid and technical assistance to child and adult care centers and daycare homes, so they may serve nutritious foods that contribute to the wellness, healthy growth, and development of young children, as well as the health and wellness of older adults and chronically impaired disabled persons. So CACFP actually has a fairly wide scope. And every single day, more than 4 million children and about 130,000 adults receive nutritious meals and snacks through CACFP. And the program operates in a wide variety of settings, including child care centers, daycare homes, Head Start and early Head Start centers, adult daycare centers, after-school programs, and even emergency shelters. And CACFP is a federal program. It's housed here in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it's administered by state agencies, commonly state departments of education or state departments of human services. Today we're going to focus on CACFP in early childhood with a special emphasis on CACFP in the Head Start setting. Now this slide just gives a little bit of history of CACFP. A very general overview of the progression, particularly of nutrition in the program. So as you can see, the program began in 1968, and I found this cute picture of some kids in Alaska being served in the early days of the program. Although I've added an asterisk because the program is not fully what it is today. For example, adults were not yet included in the mix. So from 1968 through 2016, the program evolved in many, many ways. Grew, expanded like crazy. However, the meal patterns basically remained essentially the same for that entire time period. So almost 50 years later, in 2016, the nutrition world was obviously very different than it was in 1968. Most notably, we're putting more focus on obesity prevention and related chronic conditions versus simply ensuring micronutrient intake. So the CACFP meal patterns were modernized in regulation in early 2016. I can say that these updates were not taken lightly. They were the product of years of development with guidance from a panel of expert scientists as well as policymakers. The updated meal patterns are rooted in the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics Guidance on Infant Feeding. And in addition, USDA made a promise and kept that promise to program stakeholders that any changes to the meal pattern would remain cost neutral. So that was a major push for these meal patterns as well. So after being announced in 2016, the updated meal patterns were formally implemented on October 1st, 2017. And Mimi will talk more about this, but the implementation has been facilitated by training, technical assistance, and a whole host of resources. Our hope was and continues to be maximum nutrition for program participants with a minimum burden on program providers. So now I'm going to walk through the 3 infant meal patterns, breakfast, lunch/supper, and snack, and then I'll do the same for the child meal patterns. So on these next few slides, I'll show the meal pattern table on the left with the table footnotes on the right. I will have to say that one thing I have learned in this office is to take footnotes very seriously. They actually include some important information that are not otherwise in the regulations. So I realize that this slide and some of the following slides are very fine print, and I apologize in advance if you're not able to read that. We'll definitely show you later in the presentation where you can find all this information online. Okay, so looking at the table, with infants, you can see that we now have 2 infant age groups, birth through 5 months and then 6 through 11 months. The younger age group from birth through 5 months, only breast milk or formula is required for infants of that age, and this follows the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines that complementary foods should be introduced around 6 months of age as developmentally appropriate. And then, as you can see, there are several more options for the 6 through 11-month-olds. We'd like to stress that these requirements are all based on developmental readiness, and that's something that we just can't stress enough. We never expect an infant to be served a food that he or she is not developmentally ready to consume. So note that the lunch and supper meal pattern for infants is actually identical to the breakfast meal pattern. Only breast milk or formula until 6 months of age, and then 3 components, which are basically 3 food groups, are required, and those include breast milk or formula, a grain or protein, and a vegetable or fruit. And again, this is all as developmentally appropriate until 12 months of age. The infant snack pattern, I'll move on here, is a little bit different and allows for some items not included in the other infant meals, specifically bread, crackers, and ready-to-eat breakfast cereal. And going back to the footnotes, I'd like to note a couple of important pieces of information from the footnotes of the infant tables. And the first is that while vegetables and fruits are strongly encouraged and in fact are required once developmentally appropriate, that fruit and vegetable juices are actually not allowed in the infant meal pattern. So no juice for infants. And the second thing I want to point out is that both ready-to-eat cereals and yogurt now have maximum sugar limits in CACFP, and this applies to all ages, including infants. So you'll notice throughout the infant meal patterns that servings are provided as a range rather than a finite amount. And this allows for provider discretion as an infant grows and develops. So for example, if an infant is just beginning to eat complementary foods, he or she will likely be on the lower end of the range, maybe even 0 if that's not a food that has been introduced in his or her diet yet. However, once the infant is developmentally ready to accept all foods in the meal pattern, it is expected that the full serving size will be offered. So moving on to the child meal patterns. Naturally, these tables are a little more complex due to the wider range of ages served across CACFP program types, as well as the number of options within each food component. Here you can see several options available to meet the 3 food components necessary for a reimbursable breakfast. And again, those are fluid milk, vegetables, fruits, or portions of both, and grains for child breakfast. And I'd like to point out a few footnotes, again with the footnotes. First, children age 1 must be served unflavored whole milk, and children 2 through 5 years old must be served either unflavored fat-free milk, which is skim milk, or unflavored low-fat milk, which is 1% milk. Breast milk is always an acceptable substitute at any age, but the bottom line is that flavored milk is not allowed for children younger than 6 in CACFP. The second thing I want to point out is that juice is allowable for children, not for infants, but it is for children. It counts as a fruit or vegetable serving for child meals, but it only counts once per day. And if juice is served, it must be both pasteurized and 100% full-strength fruit or vegetable juice. The third thing I want to point out is that grain-based desserts do not count toward meeting grain requirements in CACFP. For those of you who may work in a school setting, some grain-based desserts are allowed in school meals, but not in CACFP. So that's one distinction. And the fourth thing I wanted to mention is that CACFP now has a whole grain rich requirement for child and adult meal patterns. This does not apply to infants, so just children and adults. And what this means is that 1 grain serving per day must be whole grain rich. And I'll take a break from these tables to define whole grain rich on the next slide. So we officially define whole grain rich as foods that contain at least 50% whole grains and the remaining grains in the food are enriched, or foods that are 100% whole grain. There's much more detail on all of our grain requirements in this policy memo that I've listed on this slide. It definitely gets in the weeds. It's maybe not the most fun thing you'll ever read, but it's definitely like a great resource to keep on hand. But Mimi will definitely talk about some of the resources that are actually more fun that her team has developed to help with grains. I also want to say that the whole grain rich criteria initially threw many program operators for a loop. So if you've had questions about this, you're definitely not alone. However, we have been continually listening to feedback and have been fine-tuning our policy and educational materials as a result of what we've been hearing. So for example, the memo that we cited here has undergone a couple of revisions, and now it lays out 6 different options for how you can determine if a product is whole grain rich. And this, you can choose from any of these options, whatever works for you. And these were designed to give program operators flexibility and hoping to minimize stress. The bottom line is that we just want to add more whole grains to children's diets. We're not out to make people crunch numbers or make life miserable for people, but we're just really trying to get more whole grains in kids' diets. So that's the bottom line. So moving on to the Luncheon Supper meal patterns for children, I realize this table is a little trickier to read, but the main idea here is that there are 5 components required for Luncheon Supper meals, and those are fluid milk, meat or meat alternate, vegetables, fruits, and grains. And this is the first time that vegetables and fruits have been separated as 2 different components in CACFP, as we hope to encourage more exposure to and more consumption of both fruits and vegetables. With that being said, basically very few Americans of any age consume enough vegetables, and so we're always trying to give a little extra promotion to vegetables. So providers actually have the choice to serve a second vegetable instead of fruit if they want. The only caveat is that the 2 vegetables must be completely different vegetables. Now for child's snack, for a child's snack to be reimbursable, there are still the same 5 components, but only 2 of them have to be served. So you can choose any 2 of the 5. The one requirement, I guess, is that only one of the components can be a beverage. So for example, you couldn't serve fluid milk and juice together and have that count as a reimbursable snack. But basically, most other combinations work. So all of this information that I have just kind of glossed over can be found online at this website. This is really your best bet for a one-stop shop for anything related to CACFP nutrition policy. This website will direct you to the meal pattern tables that I've just shown you, as well as summaries of the meal patterns in both English and Spanish. All of our policy memos, which go into detail kind of explaining and answering frequently asked questions about various aspects of the meal patterns. And if you really want to get into some heavy-duty reading, we also have links to the actual federal regulations online. So now I'm going to hand the mic over to Mimi, who will talk about some of the fun and amazing resources that her team has created to bring these tables to life.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. As Rachel said, my name is Mimi Wu, and I'm a nutritionist with Child Nutrition Programs at USDA's Food and Nutrition Service. The team I work on develops materials as part of the Team Nutrition Initiative. So, as many of you know, the Team Nutrition Initiative supports USDA-funded child nutrition programs, including the CACFP, by providing training and technical assistance for those who plan and prepare meals, nutrition education materials for providers and teachers to be used in the classroom and childcare, and materials to be sent home to the families of the children and adults that participate in our program. Our goal at Team Nutrition is to improve children's lifelong eating and physical activity habits by fostering a culture of health and wellness. Team Nutrition's focus for the past few years has been on developing materials to support those working in CACFP, and so that's what I'm going to really be talking about today. Our materials are free for anyone to download, and many materials can also be ordered and sent to you for free if you participate in CACFP or another USDA child nutrition program. We will go over how to order our materials at the end of the presentation today. So Rachel talked about the updated meal patterns at breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack earlier in today's webinar. To help CACFP operators better visualize what meals might look like under the updated meal pattern, so we're taking those tables and kind of bringing them to life. Team Nutrition created a series of 4 posters to show what a sample reimbursable breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack for each age group of children and adults in the CACFP might look like. So the 4 posters you see are for age groups, the children ages 1 through 2 years old, children 3 through 5 years old, children 6 through 12 and 13 through 18 years old, and adult participants. These posters list the required food components and minimum serving sizes for each meal or snack, and also show a picture of what a breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack that meets the requirements might look like. The poster also includes notes and tips about the meal pattern and how they might apply to the sample meal you see on the posters. So for instance, this reimbursable lunch and supper shows 2 vegetables instead of a fruit or a vegetable, and then that green box gives you more details about that flexibility. These posters are available in English and in Spanish. Team Nutrition has also created a series of 2 to 4 page worksheets that can be used to train CACFP operators on various aspects of the meal pattern, such as choosing yogurts and cereals that meet the CACFP sugar limit, how to serve meat and meat alternatives at breakfast instead of grains, grain-based desserts, methods for healthy cooking, serving milk in the CACFP, and more. Our worksheets explain the concept in a simple, easy-to-understand way, and also include interactive activities to practice and test your knowledge. All of our worksheets are also available in English and in Spanish. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at one of these worksheets now. This slide shows our latest 2-page worksheet titled Adding Whole Grains to Your CACFP Menu. The first page of this worksheet, shown on the left side of the slide, explains the requirement for 1 serving of grains to be whole grain rich at least once per day in CACFP, and also takes that concept and applies it to different scenarios. For example, as you can see blown up on the right side of the screen, for sites that serve the same group of kids at breakfast, lunch, and snacks, so the same group of kids the entire day, grains served at one of those meals must be whole grain rich. For sites that serve different groups of kids during the day, such as breakfast to your AM group and then lunch and snack to your PM group, grains served at one of those meals or snacks must be whole grain rich. The whole grain requirement applies to the site, the physical location, rather than per participant. For sites that serve only snacks, since grains are optional at snack, the site does not need to serve whole grain rich foods every day, since they may not be serving grains every day. But on days where the site serves grains at snack, and that's the only CACFP meal or snack they serve, then the grain must be whole grain rich. The back or second page of this worksheet includes ideas of whole grain rich foods to serve at meals and snacks, although of course you can mix and match and serve these foods at any meal or snack you would like. The second page of the worksheet also includes information on how you can share information with parents on how you offer whole grain rich foods, and also has an activity where you can look at the 3 menus and decide which menus meet the whole grain rich requirement in CACFP. Team Nutrition is also developing some other resources to help CACFP operators shop for whole grains, and they'll give you more details on all the different options you can use to tell if a grain food is whole grain rich. To complement these training materials, Team Nutrition also hosts a bi-monthly webinar series titled CACFP Halftime, 30 on Thursdays, and you can see the upcoming dates and topics for the next 5 webinars. Our English webinars are held from 2 to 2:30 Eastern Time, and the Spanish webinars are held from 3 to 3:30 Eastern Time. These webinars highlight the worksheets and other Team Nutrition materials for the CACFP by providing an in-depth look at each resource and showing you how you can apply the concepts of planned menus that meet the CACFP meal pattern. These webinars also include interactive features to help check your knowledge and understanding, demonstrate your skills, and give you an opportunity to also ask questions. Certificates of participation are awarded to those who attend the entire webinar. You can also enter and track continuing education credits for watching these webinars, either live ones or recorded ones, via the National CACFP Sponsors Association website. So speaking of recorded webinars, this screen shows the titles of the webinars that we have recorded and made available via our Team Nutrition website. And as I just mentioned, remember that you can receive continuing education credits through the National CACFP Sponsors Association for watching recorded webinars and answering the post-webinar questions. So we definitely encourage you all to check them out. Team Nutrition also created a series of 40 standardized recipes especially for the CACFP. Recipes were inspired by various regions and cultures from all over the world. All of the recipes in this collection are available in yields of 6, 25, and 50 servings, and they all include a CACFP crediting statement. To complement this recipe collection and encourage healthy eating at home, Team Nutrition is currently developing nutrition education lessons and parent handouts so that these messages will be repeated and reinforced outside of mealtime. Team Nutrition is also working on another series of recipes, especially for the CACFP, and this time these recipes will be focused on items that can be served at snacks as well as at breakfast. These recipes will be released on a rolling basis starting in 2019. Separately, USDA also has a collection of 200 standardized recipes that can be used in CACFP. These recipes are written to yield 25 to 50 servings and 50 to 100 servings and include crediting information. The recipes are categorized as vegetables, salads, soups, main dishes, grains, breads, and more. So these are just some of the resources that Team Nutrition has to support this updated CACFP meal pattern. So additionally, we know that parents and families also play a huge part in supporting good health and nutrition in a child's life. So Team Nutrition also created materials to help you as a provider or CACFP operator talk about nutrition with the parents and families of children in your care. For instance, our Growing a Healthier Future with a CACFP infographic can be a great communication tool to talk to parents about the foods their children might be served at your site and how these foods support their children's learning, growth, and health. This infographic looks at children's eating patterns as reported in the 2015-2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans and highlights how the updated meal pattern can help children increase consumption of vegetables and whole grains and decrease consumption of added sugars in order to develop healthful habits that can stay with them throughout their lifetime. This infographic also promotes breastfeeding and showcases how CACFP sites can support breastfeeding through the updated infant meal pattern. As with many of our materials, this infographic is available in English and in Spanish, online, and in print. Additionally, Team Nutrition's Nibbles for Health newsletters were recently updated and released in September of this year. Child care sites can share the newsletters with parents of young children to communicate information about popular nutrition topics. There are 12 newsletters available in both English and in Spanish. As of last week, they are also newly available in print, so we encourage you to go and check that out. And finally, the Breastfed Babies Welcome Here kit was released just a few weeks ago. and includes a mother's guide, an 11 by 17-inch poster, and a message graphic. The message graphic can be used on websites, social media pages, and will also be available as a printed 4 by 4-inch by 4-inch decal that can be placed on the door, window, or elsewhere in the child care. These materials were developed as a way for child care providers to communicate that breastfed babies are welcome at their child care site. This guide can be given to moms who are visiting the child care site for the first time and may be interested in enrolling their infant, or they can be used for newly enrolled families, or for those moms that have a child or children already enrolled, but may be expecting another child and want to learn more about breastfeeding. So in addition to the materials for menu planning and materials for parents, Team Nutrition also offers nutrition education materials that can be used outside of mealtime. For example, the 2 Bite Club is an illustrated storybook for young children that encourages children to try foods from MyPlate's 5 food groups. This is available in English and in Spanish, in print, and online. The Discover MyPlate Kit was originally designed for kindergarten, but we have found that it may be appropriate for younger children as well. Kit engages children in exploring healthy choices from each of the MyPlate food groups, while also teaching them about science, English language arts, art, and health through interactive lessons. This kit includes a teacher's guide as well as emergent reader mini books, as you can see on the screen, look and cook recipes, parent handouts, and more. And for sites that might be interested in getting their hands dirty, literally, Team Nutrition's Grow It, Try It, Like It kit contains 7 booklets packaged in a sturdy, beautifully designed box. There is a basics booklet that gives an overview of how to use these materials, and individual booklets that are centered on a fruit or vegetable. Here on the screen, you see all 7 booklets, and the basics book is on the very left, kind of by itself. And then we have Crookneck Squash Row, Spinach Lane, Sweet Potato Hill, Cantaloupe Corner, Peach Tree Orchard, and the Strawberry Patch. Even though these booklets are numbered, you can use them in any order you want, and you may be able to substitute different fruits and vegetables depending on what is available locally or seasonally in your area. Activities included in Grow It include tasting, touching, and using your senses to explore the food, planting activities that focuses on how a certain vegetable or fruit grows, different ideas for active play, and growing at home messages, which helps teachers communicate with parents about what their child did or learned that day, and gives ideas of how these messages can be repeated and echoed at home. You can find all of these resources we talked about today on Team Nutrition's website, which is teamnutrition.usda.gov. The menu on the left side of the screen can help you with navigating this website. So for instance, to explore all of our materials, you can click on Resource Library as outlined in the red rectangle on the top left. For those that participate in the CACFP or other USDA-funded child nutrition programs, you can click on Resource Order Form to order materials for free. From the left toolbar, you can also check out Team Nutrition's Spanish language materials, register for our free webinars, including the CACFP halftime webinars, and sign up for our newsletters. And our webpage frequently posts information about our CACFP resources in the banner at the top, as well as spotlights under the banner, so remember to take a look at those as well. Thank you all so much for your time today, and now I'll turn this presentation back over to Rachel.
Thanks, Mimi. That was super helpful. We are actually going to switch gears once again, and we received a few questions from our colleagues at the Administration for Children and Families. These are frequently asked questions that they've received from their colleagues out in the field in Head Start. So we're hoping that tackling some of these questions will be useful for you all on the phone. So the first question we have is, how many servings can we allow? And what about the child who won't stop eating, asking for even 4 or 5 servings? So we want to say that the CACFP meal patterns do not have maximum serving sizes. So they don't have maximums on calories, not on portion sizes, so no maximums. a child may have multiple servings as they are available. But while the CACFP meal patterns are designed to meet the needs of most children within a particular age group, we totally understand that each child is different. Children go through growth spurts at different times. They may have things going on in their lives that are different. So, a child asking for extra portions may be something as simple as going through a growth spurt, or it may be a sign of maybe increased food insecurity at home. So our strong recommendation to providers is to, if you sense any type of problem, please reach out to the child's parents or caregivers for an open conversation about why the child may be extra hungry, particularly the child who's asking for 4 or 5 servings. With all that being said, CACFP providers are actually only required to prepare 1 meal per child, and every child must have the opportunity to receive a full portion. So our second question was, can we seek reimbursement for traditional or ethnic foods such as native breads? The answer is yes. We strongly encourage providers to provide meals that are culturally appropriate in all of our programs, including CACFP. There are 2 caveats with this specific example of native breads, though, so I want to walk through those. First, as a grain product, the native bread would need to meet the CACFP minimum standards for grains, and that is it must be made with enriched or whole grain meal or flour or bran or germ in order to be creditable. A second, some native breads are traditionally deep fried, and deep fried foods are not allowed in CACFP any longer. So if a traditional fry bread recipe was modified so not to be deep fried, for example, it could possibly be pan fried or baked or just cooked in any other method, and if it met the minimum requirements mentioned in the first point, then it would be part of a reimbursable meal. But the bottom line is yes, we absolutely encourage culturally appropriate meals. The third question that we received is, can we send leftover food home with children in food insecure homes? And if not, why not? The answer is no. Unfortunately, we are not able to approve of leftover food being sent home with children in CACFP. We certainly understand the good intention behind it, but this quickly becomes a food safety issue and could also potentially be a civil rights issue if certain children are receiving benefits that others are not, or if certain children are being overtly identified as needy. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, CACFP operates in a wide variety of settings. There are some exceptions to this rule in the after-school setting only. And in the after-school setting, participants may be allowed to take 1 item home under certain conditions. And the fourth question that we were given is, what are family-style meals, and how do family-style meals work in a school cafeteria setting? So family-style meal service, I'm sure most of you are familiar, is a type of meal service that allows children to serve themselves from communal platters of food with the assistance of supervising adults if needed. There are a lot of benefits to family-style meals. This allows children to be introduced to new foods, new tastes, new menus, allows them to develop a more positive attitude toward healthy foods, allows them to share in group eating situations, and just generally developing good eating habits. But unlike other types of meal service, like cafeteria lines, the family-style meals afford some latitude in the initial portion of food that's served. So additional servings of each food are readily available at each table, and more can be served at any time. So under CACFP, family-style meal service requires 3 things. First, that a sufficient amount of prepared food must be placed on each table to provide the full required portions of each component for all children at the table, as well as any supervising adults that want to eat with the children. The second is that children must be allowed to serve the food components themselves, with the exception of fluids. They don't have to pour their own milk or juice. During the course of the meal, it is the responsibility of the supervising adult to actively encourage each child to serve themselves the full required portion of each food component. And supervising adults who choose to serve the fluids, like milk or juice, directly to the children must serve the required minimum quantity to each child. So for example, a 3 to 5-year-old child must be served 6 fluid ounces of milk at breakfast, lunch, and supper meals. And the third point is that centers and daycare homes that use family-style meal service may not claim second meals for reimbursement. So we have a few more questions, and I will turn it back over to Mimi to address those.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And so another question that we get are, what are some strategies for offering water throughout the day? So some things that program operators might want to do or could do is ask the children if they would like water at different times throughout the day, particularly during or after active play and physical activity, during warm weather, and during cold weather when the indoor heat is on and the air might be dry. Although drinking water must be available to children during meal times, it does not have to be served alongside the meal. Water is not part of the reimbursable meal and may not be served instead of fluid milk. If water is offered during the meal, you might want to offer smaller amounts of water, and keep in mind that children who drink too much liquid may then feel too full to eat. You might also want to serve water with snacks when no other beverages are being served, or when water can be served in lieu of other high-calorie sweetened beverages that are not creditable, such as juice drinks, soda, sports drinks. For very young children, you may also have to use visual cues like pointing to or showing the cup or pitcher while offering them the water. For older children, you can keep child-sized cups by the sink, water fountain, pitcher, or other water source so that the child can serve himself or herself or with the help of an adult. And another question that we get quite often is, what can we do about choosy or picky eaters? And so this is a question or concern that is common among providers, parents, and pretty much anyone who's ever been in charge of feeding a young child. Many children can be choosy eaters, and so some ways that you could address this might include starting small and letting the child take and try small portions of new foods to start. Family-style meals are great for this, since the child can take as little or as much of the food as they would like. As a provider, you can offer and encourage the child to take more of the food, but the child does not have to take all of the food for the meal to be reimbursed. Role modeling can also help. Children watch you and often do what you do. So if you try new foods and talk about what you taste and see and hear when you try a new food, a child may be more likely to start trying new foods as well. It may take 10 or more times for a child to try and accept a new food, so try to stay patient and positive. If you can, try not to call them a picky eater or a choosy eater, at least to their face or where they can hear it, because if they hear that, they may be even less inclined to try new foods. Finally, involving children in the preparation and purchasing of meals, as well as talking about food outside of mealtime, such as reading about foods, doing gardening activities, or art activities with or about food, can help in getting children to try new foods and a wide variety of foods more often. And so with that, I'll turn this right back over to Rachel.
All right, thanks, Mimi.
Of course.
So I wanted to wrap up by putting in a plug for the My Peers community, which is managed by our colleagues at the Administration for Children and Families. And this is a great place to connect with fellow WIC, Head Start, Child Care, and CACFP professionals to share resources and ideas on building collaborations and to receive technical support and suggestions from each other and federal partners. I know it's always helpful to know best practices of what your peers are doing. So I think this is a great resource and encourage you to log on and check it out if you have not already. And then that brings us to the end of our presentation. We just wanted to thank you for your time and attention today, and most of all, thank you for all the work that you do every single day for America's children. Thanks for being with us, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.